A warm welcome once again. I'm sharing some of the instructions you should be aware of. Everyday assessment evaluation will happen through MCQs that will be posted in the Google Classroom at 4 p.m. and logout time will be 7 p.m. Kindly join in the Google Classroom if you haven't joined it. The code is displayed in the chat box for your kind reference. Attendance is automated and will be recorded in the ATL website every day. Certificate will be generated only for participants who complete the assessments and have 80% attendance. The first session will start now on contemporary applications of AI ML in the post COVID-19 era. It will be handled by Mr. Ramachandran sir. Sir, kindly take over the session. Over to sir.
When police use artificial intelligence to look at facial features and judge whether a person is lying, is a person does he or she have any probability of committing frauds in the society and all that. So bias creeps into the system, and so IBM, Amazon, I think even Microsoft stopped selling these artificial intelligence algorithms for facial recognition. Countries and cities also started scrapping it. One more big backlash that artificial intelligence faced was the employment part. So that was the society part. These are all technical issues. If you ask me how can bias fixed, can it really be fixed? Well, yes, you need more and more of data. You need unbiased data. You need to measure bias, make sure an algorithm is bias free before you release it to production. So those are steps for bias, but bias itself, not many organizations were aware of it. So now we look at it, there are more practices within artificial intelligence called responsible AI, and all that has taken off. So coming back to the employment part, so the bias was a technical issue. On the society side, employment was a big issue because of employment elasticity, right? So earlier, if a country's GDP grew by 1%, then there was an equivalent improvement in employment. There will be a 1% improvement in employment because there was a lot of human element or manual labor. But now, because of automation, it is down to around 0.3% according to International Labour Organization. So even if the GDP of India grew by 1%, the corresponding increase in formal employment will be only about 0.3%. So artificial intelligence again took a lot of hit. Organizations were looking at whether to use it or not because it denied employment. So all that, like I said, is pre-COVID-19. But this arrival of COVID-19 has completely disturbed the situation itself. So already AI and digital transformation was disrupting businesses. Business models were getting thrown away. New business models like subscription-based services, all that was there. Automation levels were very high. But now COVID-19 has brought certain scenarios where it is essential to have artificial intelligence, mainly because of the need for social distancing, right? So as you know, COVID-19 pandemic has very high rates of spreading. So it's better to avoid social distancing, or we need to have physical distance between humans. So that is one main situation which has changed the situation towards AI ML. So we'll see what is the impact because of that on AI. So let's step back a little, like I said, and look at the history of artificial intelligence. It started in the 1950s, the Turing test. Turing test was a test where a machine was compared to see whether it can replicate a human being. And somebody working with a machine, can they find out whether it is a human or whether it's a machine or an algorithm with which they are interacting. So that has always been the test for artificial intelligence. It is compared against human beings. How would a human being have taken a particular decision versus what is the decision taken by AI? And you will see in these examples, artificial intelligence has been slowly getting merged along with hardware. It is not just pure software anymore. So in 1955, John McCarthy coined this term in Stanford University. Then in 1961, Unimate became the first industrial robot that was used for industrial applications. This was used by General Motors in its Detroit factories for car making. And then the 60s to 90s saw a very interesting period, which was referred to as the AI winter. For those of you who closely follow the trends in artificial intelligence, you will know this term. But this was a term where this technology was felt like it was very academic in nature. So journal publications used to happen. The research folks continued working. Organizations like IBM, the big universities continued to work on it. But there was not much of industry application, and there was this period called AI winter, which saw very low activity in artificial intelligence. But again, it picked up towards the end of the century. IBM's Deep Blue defeated Garry Kasparov in chess. Like I said, artificial intelligence, the maturity has always been measured by comparing it against humans. And then 99 saw Sony release its Aibo pet robot. 2011 saw the release of Siri. IBM Watson. Watson was again a question answer type of artificial intelligence machine which IBM released. It was used in the Jeopardy game. In 2014, Amazon releases Alexa. 2017, Google beat this. Go is a Chinese game, and this AlphaGo was able to beat the Chinese champion. And Google also came up with its Tensor processing unit. So this is where artificial intelligence was not limited only to libraries in R language or Python, but hardware also saw a lot of improvements. So traditional integrated circuits are not optimized for neural networks, deep learning, these type of supervised learning algorithms that are there in artificial intelligence. So Google came up with an application-specific integrated circuit, or an ASIC, for artificial intelligence called a Tensor Processing Unit. So TensorFlow is its platform. So these type of new technologies started coming up until again towards the end of the century. Like I told you, the controversies were also there because of the bias in algorithms like facial recognition. So where are we today? So that's a big question mark. So COVID-19, I consider it as a significant event. If you look at this history of artificial intelligence, where I have borrowed from multiple sources, so today organizations like Google are talking about quantum supremacy and new forms of computing. But all that will be looked at as pre-COVID and post-COVID. That's my personal opinion. So let's go deep into this. We'll see what exactly is the industry saying about artificial intelligence after COVID-19. So this was a study which Infosys Knowledge Institute did. Like someone said the professor said during the introduction, I'm part of this team called Infosys Knowledge Institute. We conduct market studies to see what are the trends in adoption of information technology. So this Digital Radar is an annual exercise which we have been doing for the last 2 years. We have been publishing in the World Economic Forum in Davos. So in this Digital Radar study, what we do is we have taken 22 technologies and we reach out to industry leaders to understand where they are in adopting each of these technologies. And artificial intelligence, as you can very well understand, is one of the technologies. You can see it here in this chart in the bottom part. So what we found at the end of this study was that we did the study among around 1,000 large organizations globally. These were CXO level business leaders who participated in the study. And like I said, we wanted to understand where they are in their adopting of each of these technologies. So at the end of the study, organizations were classified into 3 buckets. We call them visionaries, watchers, and one more category. So visionaries are the companies which are at the leading edge. They are the early adopters. They are at the cutting edge of using these technologies. So artificial intelligence came out definitely as one of the top technologies. which business leaders need to adopt for competitive advantage. So this was the findings from Infosys Digital Radar. I'll share some more findings with you. Like I said, NASSCOM recently, this was about a week or two back, this is very new in the media. NASSCOM, as you know, is our industry association for the software industry. And they came out with this interesting study finding after COVID-19 to say that data and artificial intelligence can help drive economic growth for the Indian economy. So it's NASSCOM it is not talking only about providing employment for the IT industry or for professionals using the artificial intelligence on these type of technologies. But NASSCOM's overall finding itself was very interesting when it said it has the potential to add up to $500 billion to India's GDP by 2025. So that's the amount of value that is there in artificial intelligence. Obviously, if it is used effectively. So if you ask me, how can data and artificial intelligence really help add 500 billion or $500 billion to India's GDP? So that you must have heard the cliched statement, right? So we kept saying data is the new oil, and how new age companies make use of it. So there are some interesting examples where the value of data has really been seen. So one example I can think of is IRCTC's IPO, right? You know, IRCTC, the Indian Railways catering service, right? So they went for an IPO recently. So IRCTC, as you know, they do catering also for food items inside the train. That contributes around 30-40% of their revenue. But when IRCTC decided to go for an IPO, analysts were more interested in the data that was residing inside it. It had tons of data about you and me when we do railway booking. What are the popular routes that are used for trains? Especially now that the government is talking about privatizing railway routes. So it's very important to know which are the busy routes, what is the utilization of train on different routes, you know, which day of the week do people prefer to travel, do they go with family, what type of food do they prefer. All those things are very, very valuable. So we don't know what is the inherent value that is there with data, but these type of new business models, if you may call it like e-commerce, this is bringing out the value of data. So NASSCOM very rightly has estimated that artificial intelligence can help India's GDP grow by 500 billion by 2025. It is also supporting social initiatives. It is helping equitable growth. This is not only for CXO level people or for specific industries like the IT industry. There are several initiatives where it is plugging the gap between haves and have-nots. And again, you would have seen government's recent announcement of getting 6 lakh villages connected using optical fiber in the next 3 years, because COVID-19 has brought out the importance. All of us were talking about digital technologies and connectivity. So India has again leapfrogged other developed countries. Even before smartphones became very popular, these type of online training programs, starting from kindergarten to small schools, colleges, everybody, COVID-19 has made this online collaboration work for everybody. So artificial intelligence and data is helping social initiatives and for equitable growth also. It is also helping for economic recovery. But the most important, the interesting one that in finding in NASSCOM study that I found was that we need to enhance talent and capabilities to position India as a global hub. Again, I don't think NASSCOM has looked at it only from an employment perspective for IT industry. IT industry does not, it is a growing industry, but here even for our own benefit of our own economy, we need to focus on talent development. So like I said, universities, NASSCOM, everybody has started offering free courses on artificial intelligence and machine learning. open source tools are available, so you don't need to pay for costly license software. Anybody sitting in any corner of India can download these APIs, these programming languages, and start learning machine language. So when we come to the reskilling part, we'll see what I call the hierarchy of reskilling, how people need to have an awareness of what to learn and then eventually excel in those technologies. So this is the NASSCOM findings. The 5 top areas of focus as reported by NASSCOM are strategy, execution, and talent is the most important one. Data, these are the 5 areas of focus for India to excel in artificial intelligence. Strategy, data, technology stack, talent, and execution. So if you ask me what are the use cases, which industries has NASSCOM reported, and this will give you an idea. I may not completely agree with this. So automobile manufacturing is shown somewhere at the bottom. According to NASSCOM, consumer goods and retail is the industry that will see most adoption of artificial intelligence, followed by agriculture, banking, and insurance. The banking and insurance has been using artificial intelligence for fraud detection, for cyber security, those type of areas. Agriculture, I think it's a little futuristic, but this is what NASSCOM says. It says on the right side, you can see the details of the areas. So in agriculture, it says production planning, soil mapping, crop prices, prediction, taking steps based on the weather patterns. AI can help farmers in these areas. So I have not directly dealt with this, so I'm not sure. So some of you may be working with the agriculture field for you to know. So, but if NASSCOM says, then obviously there must be a very high potential for it here. So let me continue. We'll look at a few more analyst firms on. So I keep coming back to this topic. The topic of the session is contemporary applications of AI post-COVID-19. So let's look at Gartner's hype cycle. I'm sure all of you would be familiar with this. This is a very popular tool. So analyst firm Gartner, what it does is it takes a bunch of the all these emerging technologies and then it plots them on this curve. If you look at this curve itself, at the bottom right is where the innovation trigger starts. Innovation trigger is when a new technology is invented, let's say in a lab, right? So that's where the life cycle of this technology starts, and then it becomes popular. Media talks about it. Industry people adopt it. Service providers offer services in this, so it starts getting popular, and then it reaches what is called the peak of inflated expectations. So initially there might be some hype in what the technology can offer. But then as people start trying out pilots, as publications come out, as people share best practices, the hype element goes away and people get to know what is the real usage of a technology. So that part is called the peak of inflated expectations. And then after that, there is something called the trough of disillusionment. So some projects fail, the hype goes away. So we have seen several technologies which have seen the hype, right? So knowing whether it's hype or reality itself is a big leadership trait these days. So you may hear a lot about it in media channels. Analysts may talk about it. Your colleagues may talk about it. But if a CXO is offered a solution, let's say a blockchain for your supply chain management, so do you immediately go for it? There is what is this called? This FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. So do organizations adopt these things out of fear of missing out, or do they see real business value in it? So that's this trough of disillusionment, and then you have slope of enlightenment and plateau of productivity. Plateau of productivity is when the technology is completely adopted, like your spreadsheets, like Microsoft Excel, or presentation tools like PowerPoint, ERP, CRM. These are all applications which have reached the plateau of productivity. Now let's come back to this innovation trigger and peak of inflated expectations. So interestingly, what Gartner has done is they have split artificial intelligence into multiple disciplines. So at the beginning of this session, I was talking about some of the negative media coverage that AI has received. So what is the industry doing to correct it? So this is one way of looking at it. So one technology here that Gartner has shown on top of this at the peak of inflated expectations is embedded artificial intelligence, right? So artificial intelligence need not be always at a central location. It can also be at what is called the edge, right? Today, devices, whether it's a smartphone or gadgets used in a factory, industrial equipment used in a factory, or a washing machine at home or a microwave at home, these type of devices also have inbuilt software capabilities. Some of them are connected using the IoT, so they can exchange data. You can upgrade the software residing on it. So edge computing is a big topic when it comes to artificial intelligence. In fact, that itself is a big question when it comes to the logic, when it comes to the algorithms to take decisions. Will it reside on the edge in the device itself so that it can very quickly take a decision, or will it be in some centralized data center or a server room? So that's embedded artificial intelligence. And then you have responsible artificial intelligence. Again, bias was one of the issues we spoke at the beginning, right? So let's say somebody applies for a bank loan, and as you know, the application form asks for so many of your details. Now, if it is a bias-free algorithm, then it will estimate the risk of you repaying the loan. So banks obviously do not want non-performing assets or NPS. So they won't give away loans, but only based on the credibility of the applicant. So today, algorithms are used to estimate this. It will decide basically whether to grant a loan to you or to deny a loan. So that's where responsible AI is becoming popular. There is also explainable AI, so it cannot just be a black box type of an algorithm. If a customer asks, my loan application has been rejected, I want to know why it was rejected, then the algorithm should be able to say it is because you have a bad credit history of repaying your credit cards, you have always been late in paying your credit card bills, therefore I estimate a 0.7% of you defaulting on your loan. That is why it was denied. So that type of an explanation on for why a decision has been taken by an AI algorithm, that's becoming very important. So and it has to be socially responsible without any bias. So responsible AI is picking up. According to Gartner, this will take 5 to 10 years to mature. Then you have something called generative AI. Generative AI is a very creative one. Today you have AI algorithms which write programs on their own. They can write stories on their own. They can create portraits or drawings on their own. And then you have composite artificial intelligence, which is a combination of multiple practices. You have adaptive machine learning. So these are different types of AI ML that are getting spawned off because of the issues that are inherent with AI. This is Gartner's hype cycle for you. This is the latest 2020 hype cycle. So these are some more interesting findings from Gartner. It says India's IT spending will total 83.5 billion. There is a decline of 8% in 2020 because of COVID-19. So CXOs will reprioritize their digital transformation journeys. AI will definitely not see a big drop in it, but overall there will be a reprioritizing of digital spend. So these are some interesting trends which Gartner has reported. So it says augmented and data management and AI techniques will be used to optimize and improve operations. We'll look at a few examples from the industry of usage of AI for improving operations. So this is Gartner's estimate. Let me continue. So this, like I said, is the COVID-19 context. So far I've been talking so much of, I always keep talking about pre-COVID and post-COVID. So if you ask me what is the real reason for it, this is the COVID-19 context. because of the nature of the pandemic, there is a big need for social distancing, and it can even be taken as a criminal offense if you don't wear a mask to go outside or to a workplace, right? You may not be allowed entry. So that's how important social distancing is. And it is also important to do non-intrusive monitoring of critical health parameters of people. This depends on the industry, obviously. May not be in an office type of setup, but in factories and in hazardous environments where people are working, technologies like wearables will be very important to monitor the pulse rate, the blood pressure, the oxygen level of people, to make sure that timely alerts are raised whenever some thresholds are crossed. Because COVID-19, you never know, right? So within a factory, is it already there in the AC system or not? You don't know. So this type of non-intrusive monitoring of health parameters is going to be very important. Even in Infosys, we have used this at the entry point. We do a thermal scanning of temperature and critical facial parameters and other parameters of employees to arrive at a conclusion: are they having symptoms of COVID-19 or not? And then I act accordingly. So non-intrusive monitoring of critical parameters is going to be very important in the COVID-19 context. And that's where artificial intelligence will play a very important role in taking a decision. If a threshold is crossed, what action has to be taken for an individual. So starting from entry into the workspace itself, somebody will let in or not, depending on combination of their parameters. And then scenario analysis. So the problem is that earlier situations was what I would call the known unknowns, right? So you don't know what the stock market is going to be, let's say 1 week from now, or weather parameters, or any of those things. But you have past historical models which you can use to get a reasonable prediction on how it is going to look like. But the problem with COVID-19 is that it is a question of unknown unknowns, right? I'm sure you would have seen every day in the media there is some new report which says it doesn't transfer from surface to surface. It happens only through the air, and two people need to be together for at least 45 minutes for the transmission to happen. So many such analysis keep coming out related to COVID-19. So this is what I call the unknown unknown. So I'll give a suggestion on what type of a scenario analysis can be done. And then human-machine collaboration. So automation today has not reached levels where humans can be completely avoided. So factories are going to see a lot of human-machine collaboration. That's where artificial intelligence again will play a major role in providing a safe work environment. And then optimization of proven processes. So many of the earlier processes, estimates of market share, optimizing algorithms, even ways in which things are done like inventory planning, demand forecasting, many of those old traditional ways of doing things may have to be thrown away because of COVID-19. Again, artificial intelligence can be used to re-engineer these processes. So according to World Economic Forum, collaboration is going to be key, and the right human input is very important. So this is the World Economic Forum's perspective when it comes to artificial intelligence for COVID-19. So like I told you, this is how you can look. This is one way of planning for the different scenarios that are possible because of COVID-19. According to World Health Organization, these are 3 or 4 situations that are possible. At the bottommost is the very ideal situation where there are only sporadic cases, right? Let's call it situation 1. Situation 2 is where there are clusters of cases. Probably India is today in this situation where we have urban pockets like Mumbai, Chennai, Delhi, maybe even Bangalore these days, where number of cases is still going up. Then the extreme situation is community transmission, where COVID-19 is very widespread. So these are some ways in which business leaders can plan for each of these situations. Like I said, nobody knows after 3 months what the situation is going to be. It can vary from country to country, city to city, or even industry to industry. So business leaders can plan for this. So if you look at community transmission, then maybe you will need localized suppliers. If you are a car making organization, so border to border shipment of goods, transfer of goods across between countries may be stopped because of COVID-19. I think now the unlock phase is going on, so it's okay. But we came up with this study a few months back, and this was published in Forbes India. So it's a bit outdated, but this scenario analysis will definitely be a very valuable tool for business leaders. So coming back to these three World Health Organization scenarios, if it is going to be community transmission, then manufacturing companies need to develop localized suppliers. They need to have HR policies redefined so to focus on health. They may have to look at crowdsourcing. They may need consortiums. You saw what happened to the healthcare industry when ventilators had to be made, right? So the Ford and General Motors automobile companies ended up making ventilators because the healthcare industry was not prepared for such a high demand of ventilators. So crowdsourcing for ideas, formation of consortiums across industries, that could be the situation. But if it is a situation of a cluster of cases, then you may not need localized suppliers, but you may need alternate suppliers as a backup. You need redundancy, you need flexibility, you may need to change the product mix that is used in your factory. Again, coming back to the COVID-19 situation, so we had situations where perfume makers in France had to stop making perfume and make these hand sanitizers because the demand was so high for it. And then there is aggregation of demand. That's one way of managing the situation. Collaboration is very important in industries. And if it is sporadic cases, it's more a question of return to work, social distancing. How do you ensure hygiene? In fact, Ford factories today are looking at restructuring their factories if people are going to continue to work from home. So return to work is a situation you need to plan for if cases are going to be sporadic. So this is an example for situational analysis. This is not the only way of looking at it. It can vary from industry to industry. For example, power industry is facing a lot of fluctuation. Because of work from home, there is a very high demand for power in urban pockets. So how do they prepare for it? So here are some more estimates of IT spending before and after COVID-19. This is from market analyst from IDC. The line that you see on top, the dark blue line, was before COVID-19. So IDC had predicted growth rates around 20% across different industries before COVID-19, but there has been a fall of at least 50%, right? So as of now, IDC sees only a 10% growth in IT spending. And these are some of the use cases reported by IDC. So here is one more interesting finding which I found. So MIT's Technology Review magazine, along with Philips, has done a study on digital transformation, on digitization, adoption of technologies, specifically on AI post-COVID-19. So I found it very relevant for this session. So these are the key findings as reported by MIT. It says AI deployment is widespread, but it will take time to scale. So I mentioned at the beginning of the session, so a lot of small pilots have been tried out by organizations, but AI has still not reached these large-scale adoption, what would be the use case. Very, very rare to find a large-scale adoption of AI. Change management and data challenges do most to hinder scaling up of AI. So we know the amount of a challenge that is there in sharing of data, right? So it is still considered as intrusion of privacy. So during election times, we even had issues like the Cambridge Analytica controversy, right? So the way you click, what do you see on social media tool like Facebook, that itself can be so much valuable for election campaigners. It can probably decide the democratic results in democracies like India and USA. So that's the value of data. So Data challenges is seen as one of the showstoppers for large-scale adoption of AI by this in this MIT study. Top use cases are in the areas of quality control, customer care, and cyber security. This was a very interesting finding reported. I found it to be very interesting. And then it says currently we are in nascent stages of usage of AI and data sharing. Early adopters will benefit the most, but there are also wartime stories or stories of failure where the expected the benefits of AI adoption did not happen. So I'll some more interesting findings from this MIT study. Here are the major use cases. In manufacturing, quality control is going to be the most used use case. Then you have inventory management, you have monitoring and diagnostics. Monitoring and diagnostics is definitely one area where I have seen a lot of use of AI. When you couple it with the Internet of Things, it makes a lot of sense. There are examples with which Infosys has been involved, which I can recall. Critical parameters. Let's take the oil and gas industry, for example. There was a slurry making machine, a rotating machine, which was very critical for operations. So if there is an unplanned breakdown, it will hurt the operations for the oil and gas major. So we used sensors to collect critical parameters, and then it used to use neural networks for looking for specific patterns whenever certain events occurred. So next time, whenever it approaches such a combination of factors, you can raise an alert, can stop the machine and take some action before there's a breakdown. So monitoring and diagnostics has been a very popular area for usage of artificial intelligence. Customer care is very popular. Again, COVID-19 has made it even more important. There are chat bots which can act as if it is a human being and it can answer questions. It is self-learning. Let's say initially it is able to answer 60-70% of questions. You have a standard operating procedure. You've broken it down into a knowledge tree and fed it into the chatbot. It will be able to answer 70% of questions. The rest of it, which it cannot answer, can be redirected to a human being, and the algorithm is fed that situation. So it keeps improving its the learning rate. Right? So customer care is a popular use case for usage of AI. And then you have personalization of products. You have asset maintenance. So these are the major use cases in the manufacturing for AI. If you look at the financial services, we spoke about fraud detection in the banking industry. Cyber security is very important to detect fraudulent transactions. Even in IT industry, cyber security, customer care, fraud detection, these type of use cases are very popular. So the other interesting report that this study had was on what are the constraints for AI usage. So very interesting. I think this is global. It's not for a particular country, but the topmost challenge is business or process challenge of using AI insights. So it starts from basic identification of use cases and how to use the valuable insights that you get out of AI algorithms. So that itself is a big challenge. Data quantity, quality of data, availability of data continues to be a challenge. But for me, again, the interesting constraint or showstopper for usage of AI is the shortage of data scientists or AI developers. Or in other words, it comes back to reskilling. So unless organizations and countries, universities, academic institutions, all of them get together and focus on bringing up skill sets of people, AI will continue to see a lot of challenges. So that's where sessions like what we are undergoing today is going to be very important. It's very important for teaching professionals, fresh graduates, experienced professionals, for everyone to learn these new technologies to make good use of it. So do I need to take a break? Are there any questions at this point? I have not seen the chat tool.
No, sir, we can carry on. There is no break, sir.
Okay, so everybody is talking about usage of artificial intelligence for automation. So if you ask me, is there any framework to look at it, right? So this is one framework which we have come up with. So this is a 2 by 2 matrix, as you can see. So on the x-axis, we have the amount of the type of decision making that is involved. Structured decision making is what AI likes. It can be broken down into rules. It's very easy for programming. Unstructured decision making is the other extreme, where human instinct, human gut feeling, right, experience of people that is used. It's very difficult to program these decisions. So we have two extremes, structured decisions and unstructured decisions. And on the y-axis, you have the extent of human interaction. So on the top, you have high interaction, and at the bottom, you have low interaction. So let's take these two parameters and look at the four combinations. You have high level and low level for both these parameters. And if you put that on a 2 by 2, this is the type of framework that you get. So let's look at the top left quadrant, right, which says synergy. So this is the scenario that is expected for industries like healthcare and manufacturing, which are very critical for an economy. So you have frontline workers, from nurses and doctors to factory workers, who are physically working with the system. So here it is not possible to do any work from home. You cannot use any robotic process automation to do workflows. Robots can be used for physical work, that is possible, but these are very large systems that are at the front end of economy. So here our suggestion is that it's important for synergy. So sometimes humans need to get together, and cobots are very popular today, where robots work in collaboration with humans. So automation is going to happen here, but you need synergy. Humans also need to be available there to some extent. So what extent it is varies, because today you have robots even in hospitals. They're used to deliver medicines to the patient, for example. So there are those type of low level use cases where robots are being used, but humans are still required. So we call that as synergy. So if you look at the bottom right corner, we call it as automate using bots. This is the other extreme, where the decisions are very structured, and there is very little human involvement required. This is the type of work that you see reported in papers every day, where it says TCS has decided that 75% of their employees will permanently work from home by 2025 or 2022. So many of these organizations, let's call it as office type of environment organizations, have realized because of COVID-19 that it is really possible to run their operations with most of the employees working from home most of the time. Earlier, if you recall, let's think of January, February, before the COVID outbreak, right? So work from home was looked at as a luxury, right? So there was always a doubt in the mind of management's mind: will people really be productive? Will the teamwork be effective? Will communication be okay? Will somebody be reachable? All that stuff. But actually, COVID-19 has broken all those myths about work from home. Productivity has actually been found to be very good. Uh, Remote collaboration has been found to be very effective. In fact, Toyota released a new version of their minivan called Sienna, with the entire team working from home. So they had done some preliminary tests before the lockdown, obviously. But then once the lockdown was announced, most of the team members worked from home. So they used the internet, obviously, to collaborate, for sharing of files, for visualizing CAD models of parts. A lot of changes had to be done. All that was done working from home. They used 3D printing to make prototypes. So this new model car was rolled out on time with the team working from home. So we have these type of best practices that are reported by world leaders like Toyota, And that really gives a lot of confidence for more people to work from home. So that is this bottom left quadrant that you see. There will be a lot of automation using bots. So repeatability is the question here. There was one estimate which said 80% of job that happens in industries is repeatable. Everything together, factories, office together, a very, very broad estimate. So that's the amount of replacement of humans with algorithms and robots that can happen. So what do these people do? They are replaced by a robot or an algorithm. That's a big social question that I keep coming to. So reskilling is one answer. So people who unlearn these old ways of doing things and who learn new ways of doing, they will still find themselves employable. The others are going to find it a challenge. So the other two quadrants, if you look at the bottom right quadrant, I call it the virtual teams. So these are very niche areas like customer service, scientists working in a lab, planning, these type of teams. So they are very ideal for virtual type of working. So sometimes they may need to meet physically. Rest of the time they can use video calls and chats and those type of tools. So here AI may not play a big role. And on the top left is where the extent of human interaction is very high because this is for use cases like last mile delivery used by logistics, even education can be there. So these things have to be delivered, then there is no alternative. So home delivery, logistics, these type of things. Here also there could be a usage of AI. So technologies like drones for delivery are slowly coming out, but that may not be the big area of focus for me. This bottom left quadrant, automate using bots. That's going to be the big focus when it comes to usage of AI post COVID-19. Okay, so continuing this broad areas of application, this is one way where I can give you a big picture of what are the type of applications. So you start with people and then you make products, and then there are processes used in factories to make it, and eventually you deliver it to the customer. So on the people side, we have monitoring of health parameters. That's all on the people side. We have seen that. On the product side, starting from new product launches to installation, commissioning, ongoing support, all that is being supported by artificial intelligence. We saw the Toyota example. There are call centers that are heavily automated and used for customer support these days. And then on the process side, that's what's happening inside the factories. There is human-machine collaboration, and AI is used extensively for quality control, it is used for decision making when it comes to operations. And on the customer side, the sale process itself is becoming contactless. I think Maruti was the example which reported. Maruti says it has 26 touch points for a customer to evaluate a product and buy it. And out of those 26, around, I think it's a 21 touch points are digitized today. So there are very few, like if you want to do a test drive, you still need to go to the showroom for the final vehicle delivery, for repair, maintenance. For those type of situations, you still need to go to a dealer showroom, but other things can be done digitally. You can look at car models, you can open it and see the interiors, you can change the color of the car and see how it looks like. You can superimpose your photograph and see how it looks like. All that can be done digitally. So I come from a manufacturing perspective, so I keep coming back to manufacturing. So very broadly, if you look at the life cycle of a product, whether it's discrete manufacturing or process-based manufacturing, you need people. You are making products using a process. You have your customer. So AI can play a significant role in all of these stages. Okay, so let me give you some real-life examples. Talking about COVID-19, the first thing that comes to your mind is when will the vaccine be ready, right? Are there any drugs ready? So here is an interesting example where IBM has used a combination of artificial intelligence, cloud, and robotics to assist drug making for the COVID-19 situation. So this is the situation. You see the application. There's the
Sir,
screenshot of the.
please make it full screen. Sir,
Uh,
please make it full screen.
okay. So you can see the application screen here. So IBM has come up with a cloud-based tool. So the way the tool works is it's a collaboration tool. Let's say you have 10 experts who get together for a meeting. It's a Monday morning today, 9 o'clock. So they want to try a new medicine for COVID-19 treatment, obviously. So they use a drawing tool and come up with these molecular structures on how the medicine should look like. So what the AI tool will do in the background is it will run its algorithms to estimate different combinations for the ingredients that should go into these drugs to come up with these combinations. And then it will issue instruction to the robots that are there in the lab to come out with these combinations, do certain trials on it, tests on it, and report back the findings. Here, this is one practical, very recent example of usage of AI in the COVID-19 context. Like I said, AI doesn't work on its own. It works along with other technology tools. There is hardware involved, and it's much more effective when humans are also involved in it. It can take a lot of autonomous decisions on its own, but there are situations where there is innovation required, and innovation can be done only by humans. So no AI can give you innovation. So this is one example from the healthcare context. Now coming to quality control, Western Digital is a high-tech company. So we have been involved in this project, so I can give you more details about it. This is a publicly reported case study. So Western Digital, as you know, is one of the leading manufacturers of hard disks and storage devices. It's in the high-tech industry. The high-tech industry, as you know, has wafer-thin margins. There is so much of competition. The products are getting commoditized from gigahertz to terahertz. The size is going up and the price of products is coming down. So Western Digital had quality issues in its shop floor, and that had a direct hit on its margins, obviously. So they went for machine vision to spot quality issues. This was part of a bigger smart factory initiative that they took up. You can also call it Industry 4.0. So I'll slowly come to Industry 4.0, but Western Digital is one example. You can find the case study also that's published on the internet. So machine vision was used to for pattern matching neural networks along with neural networks to spot issues in their products before a human spotted it, because these are very high-speed industries. If you don't spot an issue quickly and take corrective measures, then the whole batch will be lost for quality issues. So this is one example for quality control. But again, machine vision for quality inspection has been around for decades. But now, if you ask me how different is it, so that's where, going back to the initial slides, there is edge computing these days. So the speed used, the algorithms used, interoperability, combination of multiple systems like IoT. So these are all the new developments that are there in AI today. So I told you about the Western Digital example, and it's basically a part of the Industry 4.0 initiative in Western Digital. So I would say artificial intelligence, any discussion is incomplete without talking about Industry 4.0, specifically in the manufacturing context. So I think most of you are from the electronics department, but I'm pretty sure you know what is Industry 4.0. It is the fourth industrial revolution. So the first one happened in the beginning of the 19th century when steam power was used to run textile machines, right? So there was mechanization using steam power. So that was called the first industrial revolution. It happened in UK. And then the second industrial revolution happened in US when Ford introduced mass production in Detroit for its Model T cars. Electricity was used, the assembly line was introduced. So the product was moving, the humans were stationary. So that was the second industrial revolution. The third one was where computer and automation was used. So third industrial revolution itself, if you ask me, saw a bit of introduction of artificial intelligence. Today we are talking about the fourth industrial revolution, where we talk about cyber physical systems. So these are the four properties of Industry 4.0 as reported by the German government. So that itself tells you how important this concept is. So it's a very technology agnostic concept. They are not telling you to go for specific commercial systems, but these are the broad principles of Industry 4.0. The first one is interoperability, where people can talk to each other. You can call it IoT. And then you have information transparency, where digital twins can be used. These digital twins are like virtual replicas of your physical system. So you can use it to run simulations. How will my system run if I run it at 50% capacity or 75% or 125% level capacity because of COVID-19, right? So digital twin is one of the critical factors of Industry 4.0. Then you have analytics for decision making, and finally you have autonomous decision making, where artificial intelligence comes in. So Industry 4.0 will be one big area where you will see a lot of usage of artificial intelligence. Here is one example from the retail industry. We saw one from health industry, one from manufacturing. This is from retail, where Walmart has this intelligent retail lab where it uses cameras to spot customers, what is the purchase they do, and then it also helps the back-end staff to decide restacking of products, where to restack products, in what sequence to do it. It'll keep tracking the patterns of purchase and tell you which is a fast-moving product, where to keep the what is the ideal location for keeping it so that people buy more of it. And then AlphaBot is used as a robot to pick up in the warehouse and bring it to these retail shelves. So that's the first part of my session. Again, do you need to take a small break? The rest of the session, I'll talk a little bit about reskilling. So what I covered so far is, as I said, most of you know about what are popular use cases for AI/ML, but COVID-19 has completely disturbed it. How exactly is it going to be? Nobody knows, but I'm pretty sure that this is going to be a critical milestone in AI. I gave you a lot of examples where AI/ML is going to be very, very important for managing COVID-19 itself, and plus because of reprioritizing of investments and other situations also, AI is going to see some changes. So some industries, the adoption may happen faster, while it may become slower in some other industries because of fall in their business itself. For example, travel, tourism, these are all industries that are heavily impacted because of COVID-19. It's going to take a few quarters, or maybe even more, for the industry to pick up. So there it's different. Those are like exceptions. But where regular operations have started or are trying to start, like automobile, IT industry, general office industry. So there we saw a lot of examples where AI makes a lot of sense, not just for the sake of using it, but it is going to be very, very essential. So that was the first part. Now coming to the second part, like I said, this is about reskilling, and any organization which focuses only on the technology part, on investments, will not be able to effectively use AI. They need to focus on the people side. So can you tell me what these terms mean for you? There is a data evangelist, there is a storyteller, there is a thought leader, rockstar, ninja. These are all job roles or designations that are there today. So storyteller, for example, right? So organizations like Microsoft, General Electric, they have what is called a chief storyteller. So Steve is the chief storyteller in Microsoft. I think it's Thomas Keller in General Electric. HP has a storyteller. Now even other organizations like Wipro, I think Cognizant, I saw one in Infosys also. So just to give you an example, these are the type of job roles that are coming up. You can see that there is a heavy dosage of data involved here. Uh, Going back to storyteller, why do you need such a role? It's because the business, the product has become so complicated. You need these storytellers to even to explain to investors, maybe to your own employees, on what is the business model used, how do you make money. But most of them are also data related. Data evangelists, data scientists have always been there. Contact tracing, again, a very interesting one because of COVID-19. Because if your supply chain, you need to, for regulatory requirements, if you need to keep track of what all locations did your product go through or your people go through, then you may need contact tracing. So again, technology helps you there. So these are some of the new roles that are coming up because of digitization. So this is the book I was telling you at the beginning of the session, which I co-authored with Professor Prasad. It is available on Amazon if any of you are interested. And I was also writing a series of articles, weekly articles in Nanayam Vigadan in Tamil. For those of you who read Nanayam Vigadan or Tamil, you may want to look at this. This was done in first quarter, and I think the old issues when the print version was still going on before COVID-19, all this got published. These are also available online. So coming back to a bit of more deep dive on skill development. So reskilling is not just about classroom training. So this is the what I call the continuum of reskilling. So it starts with basic skilling. If you take the question of, if you take the topic of artificial intelligence, what you teach your school students, your college students, well, even school students for that matter, can be taught today. So that is basic skilling. This is a generic framework that can be used for any skill development. Let's take it for AI. So it starts with basic skilling, and then you have upskilling. Upskilling happens when there is an incremental improvement. You already know some technology, you learn how to do it. Let's say you know R as a programming language from your university days. If you need to do it in Python, so the concepts will be same, but the programming language will be different. Reskilling is where it is completely a new area for you. For somebody who has no idea, who has not done a formal education on machine learning, they may not even know what is correlation, regression. So forget neural network and more advanced concepts. It will definitely be reskilling for them when they need to be taught these new skills. New skilling, new skilling is a term which we introduced in this book where we said readers should look at future technologies. So you may ask me, how can somebody estimate what is future technology? So we are not talking about any astrology or that type of prediction, but what we are saying is that good business leaders should be on the lookout for new trends, like we saw about the scenario analysis for COVID-19. So that type of a forethought is required among good leaders, so that they foresee what are the skill sets required for their organization. And we call that as neo-skilling. So this is Professor Vijay Govindarajan. He calls it the three-box solution. This was something similar to what we called as neo-skilling. So in his three-box approach, what he says is the first box is for focus on your current operations. So obviously, whether you are in manufacturing or running a hospital, you cannot drop what you are doing today. So that is the first box. The second box is to unlearn old ways of doing things. So you may have some legacy IT systems, you may have old ways of doing things. So those ways have to be given up. There may be some unlearning required as part of your change management. And the third box is again the futuristic one. So this three-box solution is one approach which Professor Vijay Govindarajan has proposed. So you can check more details of it online. And this is what I call the reskilling hierarchy. So the three important players involved in reskilling are, you can see professionals on top, the industry is there, and the government is there. So this was one of the basic questions that we had when we started the study on this neo-skilling. So everybody was talking about reskilling. This was 2 3 years back, much before COVID-19. But already digital transformation was starting to disturb several industries, even the education industry. I'll show you one slide on education industry. So the question we had was who should really fund this reskilling? Who should take responsibility for it? So there were several studies that were published. If you look at developed economies like US, specifically in areas like Silicon Valley, for example, the professionals were so advanced in their understanding. They said, I own my own reskilling. I know where I can do. I have access to Coursera. I know where I can go to. I can log into edX and learn whatever course I want. So professionals felt that they own reskilling. But there are other industries where industry has to own this. In some places, government had to take up the ownership for reskilling. So if you ask me, basically it is a collaboration. All three need to work together. And this is the hierarchy. It's not just about attending classroom training. It starts with awareness. So separating the hype from reality. So that's where youngsters need a lot of guidance from good mentors or education institutions like a college for them to know, for them to have a basic awareness on what to learn. What are the areas where there is industry demand? So industry connect is very important for academic institutions. So that's where hopefully sessions like this should help you. And then you need access to technology. Once you have awareness on what to learn, you need access. So again, that's where NPTEL, MOOCs, SWAYAM, you have so many initiatives that are very local to India or that are global, available anywhere, accessible from any place in the world using any device. So access to these skill sets is available. Affordability again is coming down drastically because of COVID-19. You would have seen it. So enrollment in even top universities like MIT, Stanford, Harvard has fallen drastically. So these universities are struggling even to have their regular operations. So affordability for picking up reskilling is definitely there because everybody is talking about democratization. So we need an ecosystem where we have a lot of people who are trained in these technologies. Only then we, as a overall society, we can reap the benefits of AI. And then you need appetite. Even if all these things are there, if youngsters don't have the appetite to learn these new technologies, then all this effort is going to be a waste. And then people need an ambition to excel in these technologies. So this is what I call the reskilling hierarchy. This is World Economic Forum's list of 10 top hard skills. Artificial intelligence is the topmost there, no surprise. There are other technologies here like analytics is there, Internet of Things is there. All of these also work very closely with artificial intelligence. There's a lot of cross collaboration that happens with these technologies. They don't work in a silo. If anybody learns that way, also they're going to miss the big picture. So it's very important to have a broad understanding of what's happening and then go very deep into specific areas like any of these hard skills. And these are the soft skills. Again, this was before COVID-19, but you can very well appreciate it today. There are things like negotiation. There is a cognitive flexibility where you may need to switch contexts. You may need to teach something to your kid at home while working from home and then suddenly get on a call with your customer, then have a team meeting in the afternoon, do a presentation. So there is so much of rapid context switching that is happening today in the COVID-19 world. So this is one of the important soft skills. So these are the other soft skills that World Economic Forum has published. So this was an old slide that I had, but I thought I'll show it today. Just to give you an idea of the forethought that Professor Clay Christensen had. Professor Clayton Christensen from Harvard Business School, as you know, is the person who coined the term disruptive innovation, right? So he said innovation in certain industries itself can lead to some industries getting wiped away. So he had foreseen this. I mean, he was obviously not referring to COVID-19, but he said 50% of the 4,000 colleges and universities in the US can go bankrupt in 10 to 15 years. This was more because of MOOCs and other technologies, but now COVID-19 has made this so difficult. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you know, right? So, because of the stop in inflow of students from China and India, several universities in US, Europe, even Australia are struggling because their inflow of students has gone down drastically. They're not going to make so much money by delivering classes online. So this is just an example of education sector getting disrupted because of technology. Okay, so there is so much talk about China these days. So let me ask you a very simple question, right? All of you know that Apple makes. I mean, we are trying for Make in India now, but before that, Apple made most of its products in China, right? So can you tell me what was the reason behind that? Right? So, in the interest of time, so the popular answer, most of us think it's because of cost, right? We think China has cost advantages, labor is cheap there, their supply chains are very efficient, they have good infrastructure, power. But the answer that Tim Cook is the CEO of Apple. So when media guys asked Tim Cook on what was the reason why Apple does most of its manufacturing in China, the answer he said was very interesting. He said it's because of skill. So he said China has moved into very advanced manufacturing where you find the intersection of craftsman kind of skills, sophisticated robotics, computer science. Yeah, you know the type of expectation Steve Jobs and Apple has for their products, right? They are so passionate about their product, where it needs creativity, it needs very advanced manufacturing skills to make it at very low cost. So Tim Cook said that the reason for making all this in China is because of the skill sets that are available there. This was again about 1 or 2 years back before COVID-19, but it gives you an idea of how important skill sets are. And again, talking about coding, Bill Gates talking about coding is no big surprise, but Sundar Pichai and Satya Nadella have all spoken about it. But you may say they are from IT industry, but then today we have reached a point where no job is complete without basic some level of basic programming. So that's it. So that's on the skill side. So with that, I will stop my presentation. So thank you so much for the opportunity to present. Like I said, I wanted to cover two broad topics. The first one was on contemporary AI ML in the post COVID-19 context. So it's going to be very important to watch the coming weeks and months. Every day there is an interesting article in the media getting reported on how basically on COVID-19 itself, and then you can, if you are someone who tracks the AI ML very closely, you will see very interesting applications of it on a day-to-day basis reported in media and from your industry contacts. And reskilling is the other one, like I said. So me and Professor Prasad continue to write about it. So I keep talking to organizations to continue our work on how we can effectively do large-scale reskilling, because until we find an answer to it, it's going to be a very important topic. I think we have another 10 minutes if there are any questions, but I'll stop here. Thank you once again for the opportunity to share my thoughts on this interesting topic.
If there is any question from the audience, please post it in the chat. Or you can unmute and you can ask.
Was the audio clear? I see some comments here. I hope my audio was clear.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, it was clear.
Okay.
Hello.
Yep.
Hello. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Myself, Dr. L.S. Maurya, professor in Department of Computer Science and Engineering at Sri Ramurthy Smarak College of Engineering Technology, Bareilly, Uttar Pradesh. Sir, I had listened your lecture. It was really very informative and very interesting also. I had sir, one issue. Can you suggest some of the latest topic or area under which or inside that area we can give some thesis and dissertation related problems to our MTech computer science and engineering students?
Topics for MTech thesis. Can I take it offline, sir? I'm not.
Related to this artificial intelligence and whatever the sub areas that you had covered.
Sure. Can we take it offline, sir? You have my contact details. We can be in touch. I can suggest some topics too. I'm not able to. Several topics that I covered in the presentation are already there, but depending on the industry, depending on what type of work, so I can share my thoughts with you after the call. Yeah.
Excuse me. Sir, whatever the topics are has projected in the PPT, like contact tracing. So all those things, they can do it as a thesis work.
Correct.
So that slide you can refer for doing the thesis work, because that is all application oriented only, what sir has projected. Okay. Okay, Tefila, we can conclude.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, sir. It was a wonderful session. It was highly informative. There was a lot of takeaways from your session. So thank you so much for sparing your time with us. And sir, I would like to just repeat the instructions that I gave at the beginning of the session. Yes, thank you. So professors, and I would, yes, sir, thank you. I would like to just share the instructions again. So every assessment evaluation will happen through MCQs that will be posted in the classrooms at 4 p.m. and the logout time will be 7 p.m. Kindly join in the Google Classroom if you haven't joined yet. Code is displayed in the chat box for your kind reference. Attendance is automated and it will be recorded in the ETL website every day. Certificate will be generated only for participants who complete the assessment and have 80% attendance. So thank you for your participation. The next session will start at 2:30. To join. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Enjoy the rest of your sessions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Bye.